It's not proper to point a finger to the sun, moon, or stars. When speaking of Earth as an element or substance, they call it Holy Earth. These people call the rainbow in the sky a dragon, which draws water from the earth to heaven. So wrote the folklorist Oskar Kolberg as he described superstitions of Chełmskie, easternmost Poland, in the late 1880s, only about 150 years ago. Regardless of Catholicism's ubiquity, the faiths of villagers, ranchers, farmers, rural folk very often, still today, retain seemingly unchristianly beliefs, which took shape over centuries as Catholicism and polytheism blurred together, while the villagers adopted the new faith but refused to give up the traditions which they had always maintained. From Krakow, the ethnographer recounts. Once in those old days, so long ago, the earth was in mourning, despairing because people kept reaping her gifts of produce too greedily, leaving her nothing left of her own creations. So earth despaired, and she prayed to the Lord Jesus, that since everyone busied themselves in industrializing her works, that earth might be allowed to reap harvests in return. So the Lord Jesus replied, "You will give birth to man, and then consume him. You will eat what you give birth to, for it is yours." And still today, this is why we each must return to earth when we die, to return what is hers. A quite similar story can be found in most Polish regions, embedded across great distances, reflecting the tale's archaicness. In old days, bodies were turned to ash by fire, so souls could fly away. Then the ash, also called dirt, was placed within an earthenware vase and buried in the earth, quickly becoming part of her body again. And where there is the mother, there is the father. You can't lay on the ground before the first thunder. There's still a sickness in the earth hasn't shaken it off yet. Through winter, earth sleeps. Her soul is the prisoner of the demons of winter, who rampage across her slumbering body. But on the day of first thunder, her husband breaks her deep sleep, and, like the princess in the fairy tale, he lays with his wife, and so... It's a sin to hit the ground in spring. The earth is pregnant. She gives birth to rye, flowers, and all the types of grass. You can't beat the earth, because the earth gives birth. The earth gives bread. That's how it was. The earth was not allowed to be beaten or shot. No, that's not right. This is why, in the spring around harvest, the people will kneel down and kiss the earth. Also, they kiss her before they embark on a journey and when they return home, in the same sense that mothers and grandmothers kiss foreheads to bless the traveler on their journey. This is so totally culturally ingrained that even Poland's Pope, Jan Paweł, insisted to kiss his mother when he returned to her on several different occasions. He would kiss her in gratitude and respect. Actually, you'll see Poles mocking this, even though they know other Poles who kiss the earth in other contexts. This is because Poles generally love mocking popes for any reason whatsoever. They must keep their Catholicism spicy. Now, such is known in the riddles and folk songs of Poland. A mother low down, a father high up, a blind daughter, and a mad son. The Earth Mother, the Lightning Father, the Queen of Nights who folk songs know as Marzonna, and most likely the crazed howling wind, Pochwist. It is very clear that Earth was one of the first four things to exist, but folklore disagrees on the exact order of things. Many sources cite the abyssal waters as the first thing, and from the water came God and Devil, and from them come Earth and then the lightning who protects Earth. This can be understood as Svalrog and Volos, creating Mokosh, and Svalrog then creating her guardian, Perun. In all stories, after the making of Earth comes the striking of the devil with lightning, and is casting down into the abyssal waters, leaving Earth in the care of the lightning maker. So when the winter storms restrict him to the sky, the Earth slumbers, and when he returns with the rains, the Earth blooms with fertility. All the flowers, and by extension all the animals, are their children, created and ever renewed by the cyclical remarriage of heaven and earth. Our relation to our mother was articulated beautifully by folklore preservation salvationist, Pawina Hoishova. O clod of earth, O holy relic, some incomprehensible force binds us together. You feel in my hand how my blood circulates. This blood that pulsates within me is, after all, your blood too. For these are vital nectars that you give abundantly, that turn into blood within me and give me life. While I've tried many times to summarize the place of the Earthen Mother in folklore, I can't say it better than the scholar Katarzyna Prorok. For keepers of traditional culture, Earth is a sentient being and a mother, and man is her son. Holy and everlasting, fruitful and rich, she nurtures and grows life, nourishes animals and humans. She gives rest for man after death by welcoming him back into her womb. She embodies a moral sensitivity, and she righteously consumes the wicked. She is a source of justice and truth. She constitutes, like God himself, ethical authority. At the same time, she physically supports man, gives humanity something fundamental, concrete, and measurable. This is Slavic Polytheism 101, and today we will focus on Mokosz's folkloric place as Queen Earth, the Land Mother. The oldest historians recorded a little of her worship, so much of today's discussion will focus on the folkloric canon. In an eventual companion episode, her theorized anthropological descent from the mother goddesses of the Bronze Age Europe will be explored. Most scholars of the topic have relied on comparative materials, which are admittedly more speculative excursions than are the typical focus of this channel, so it feels better to explore those in their own video and focus on our usual materials in this one.
Садиться не велю, велю слушать стоя. Так вот, покуда я еще не стар, охота мне вас всех женить. Возьмите сыны по стреле, выйдите в чисто поле, натяните тетиву и стреляйте. Куда чья стрела упадет, там и судьба его.
Ты расстарался, брат. Теперь ее вовек не сыщешь.
Видать, судьба. Пойду искать. Лягушка. Лягушка, отдай мою стрелу.
Возьмешь меня замуж? Отдам.
Что ты? Как же я возьму тебя, если ты лягушка?
Знает, судьба твоя такая. Бери.
Садиться не велю, велю слушать стоя. Хочу посмотреть, которая из невест лучшая рукодельница. Пускай сошьют мне к завтраму каждая по рубашке.
Иван-царевич, печаль твою. Не тужи. Ступай лучше спать. Утро вечера мудренее.
Рубашку в черной избе носить. А эту я в бане ночью надену. А вот эту рубашку только в праздник носить. Ну что ж, теперь пускай невесты испекут мне к завтраму хлеб. Хочу знать, какая лучше стряпает.
Понравилась ли батюшке рубашка моя?
Понравилось.
Но об остальном не думай, не тужи. Ступай домой, ложись спать. Утро вечера мудренее.
Врагов убивать. Этим камнем сарай подпирать. Этот хлеб только в праздник есть. Так вот, сегодня велю всем 3 невестам на пир явиться в шелках и нарядах.
Не печалься, Иван-царевич. Иди на пир один, а я вслед за тобой буду. Как услышишь стук да гром, не пугайся. Скажи, это моя лягушонка в коробчонке едет.
А где ж твоя невестушка?
Она вслед прибудет.
Не бойтесь, это моя лягушонка в коробчонке едет.
Иванушка. Судьба.
На государя покушаетесь? Глаза лишили!
Нам переждать, и я была б твоей. А теперь прощай. Ищи меня за 3-9 земель, 30
Здравствуй, молодец. Садись, отдохни. Здравствуй, дедушка. Сжёг, выходит, кожу лягушиную. Ты откуда знаешь? Как не знать? Не тобой кожа надевана, не тобой должна быть снята. Ищи теперь свою Василисушку в царстве Кощеевом.
Кощеевом. Да как же попасть туда?
И клубочек поперед себя пусти и ступай за ним по ниточке. Не сворачивай.
Погоди, Иван, не шути. Я тебе еще пригожусь.
Не бей меня, Иван-царевич. Я тебе когда-нибудь еще службу могу сослужить.
пригожусь. Иван-царевич, пожалей, брось ты меня в море синее.
Избушка, избушка, стань по-старому, как мать поставила, к лесу задом, ко мне передом.
Зачем, добрый молодец, ко мне пожаловал?
А не знаешь ли, бабуся, где Кощей живет?
За бабусю тебе спасибо. Никто так не называл. Все зовут только Ега, Костяная нога. Неужели думаешь победить Кощеюшку?
А ты что про это думаешь?
Садись в стул. Покажу тебе, где царство Кощеева. Трудно с ним тебе будет справиться, потому что смерть его на конце иглы, а игла-то в яйце, яйцо в утке, утка в зайце, заяц в сундуке, а сундук в цепях на дубу висит. И этот дуб, Иван, бережет Кощей, бережет его пуще глаз своих.
Так вот оно, царство Кощеева.
Just as the folkloric memory maintains an image of the lightning-making hero in countless folktales, a slightly more complicated lineage reflects memories of his wife. She, who is unmatched in embroidery, sewing, baking, queen of surface waters, whose threads made in the stars control fate itself. Mother of grandmothers, who is beloved by the so-called witches who walk in her wake. She who was held prisoner beyond the world by a sorcerer until her beloved freed her. All these traits descend from the mother of mothers. Her exact story has been more obscured than Perun's. This archetypical princess of waters is not identical to the goddess. Her reflection, too distorted to tell if these are simply women blessed by her, or so-called nymphs or fairies living in her her good graces, or indeed if she has taken a winding path from the ancient myths into Christianized folklore. These tales perhaps then memories of when the lightning god rescued her from the Patriarch of Blackness and Lord of Snakes, Perun as Christ ensuring her authority over her children, growing fertile and green and decorating herself with the gown of life. These folktales are less informative than many we've explored before, but they don't need to clarify whether she is priestess or nymph or goddess, since all motifs can be traced back to their originator, thanks to the tapestry of contexts in surrounding folk culture. We should now address some house cleaning, as our mother would want of us. Does the name the chroniclers give us, the seldom described Mokosh, correspond to the folkloric Matka Ziemia? The name of Mokosh derives from dampness or moisture, though it can also serve as a root which lends itself to the concept of twisting things. It is obvious for the damp goddess to be in reference to the dampness of the soil, so we find it rather straightforward. Mokosh and Ziemia are simply synonymous. Most attestations of the name Mokosh come from the Slavic East. Polish chroniclers attest Lekites knew the same goddess, but they're not concrete about her name. Perhaps the mysterious Ziemeia in Polobia was their equivalent, though this name might be related instead to a goddess of rain amongst the Lekites. Likewise, since Ziemeia literally means earth, it might awkwardly distract some listeners. So even though we aren't certain that Mokosh was the primary name used in history across all the Slavic world, it seems the simplest to repeat in video format. Still, many reconstructionist Rudnovery separate these goddesses into two, and we won't write off their logic in doing this. We agree that there likely are two goddesses who are expressed as grandmother and mother, or, perhaps more accurately, great creator predating the line of parentage and the grandmother. But we take a slightly different understanding, informed by folklore. Within creation, the first primordial thing was the infinite ocean, and then from this Svalrug met Vovos. Then they created Earth and her Perun. The heavens were made above and afterlife below, but the infinite waters persisted, as folk expressions continually insist that Earth floats upon infinite waters, like a cake or a pancake, or that the Earth is like a pedestal supported in the middle of the waters, so this leads to an obvious conclusion. The Earth, Ziemia, Mokosh, is the damp mother floating upon waters. She is the trunk of the tree, and then the great vast waters beneath all of creation is herself the creator of the mother. We'll talk more of this figure much later in this video. While some Rudnovery will transfer all of Earth into the grandmother and name her Ziemia, leaving only matriarchy to the mother Mokosh, this decision does contradict Polish folklore, so we do not agree with it, but we are sympathetic to it, since, really, this is quite similar to disagreements over where Perun should end and Svalrug should begin. The two sets of grandparents and parents are quite similar, so disagreements between where parent and child begin and end are not surprising. Lastly, some confusion is caused online over the chronicles, which sometimes list Marzona as the mother of harvests, the Slavic Ceres. But I don't see why Marzona Ceres would be necessarily confusing, because Marzona is the goddess of reaping and death, which define the harvest. Ceres is the agricultural goddess, but Greek Gaia is the planet herself. It's true that Mokosh is more active and direct in Slavic myth than Gaia is usually remembered, but for both religions, the existence of a daughter who controls the harvests or perhaps seasons will not undo their mother's place as the earth itself. Marzona was not attested in the ancient Slavic East, while in Poland she and her sister were so important that they seem to have somewhat obscured some of their mother's cultic importance. So these seem to be tribal variants of faith which simply attest to diversity, similar to what could be seen between, say, Greek Delphi versus Alexandria. Mothers and daughters sharing or switching levels of importance doesn't need to distract us from painting a larger picture, focusing on commonalities. Creation stories agree on the chronology of Earth. After the banishment of the devil, Earth was made fertile by the great storms and the sunlight which followed. After the blooming, the earth was an unnavigable wilderness, a place of forests and lava, meaning the uncultivated meadows where demons rampage and kick up dust, where no crops thrive because the soil is too wild. God took the soil and sculpted it into the giants, who got to work building the mountains and cultivating the meadows into the black, rich farmland, after humanity was created too, and then the giants were mostly destroyed or forced to hiding, retreating up to the mountains, and humans inherited the black fields. The first people and beasts then reaped too greedily, so Earth was given the right to consume us all and reform us in the cycle of material life. Earth is the mother, and in most Slavic culture the mother has great power and authority. To many in the West, the deception of Eve was seen as a testament to a weakness or over-emotional nature in women, which makes the woman defective and the servant of the devil. This is why women were seen as unfit to lead in the early Christian church. But in Polish folklore, often the mothers and grandmothers are the most intelligent folk, and the devil tries to seduce women because he sees their wisdom as more valuable. The devil does not need strong beasts, he already has plenty of those. He needs a clever servant. The proportionally high cases of demonic influence over women is simply because he desires them much more strongly. And when he fails because he has nothing that he can offer wise matriarchs, as they already know more than he. To understand the Slavic conceptions of the mother goddess, viewers should disregard more American or Anglosphere preconceptions of the nature of the parents. Generally, many Slavs saw fathers and mothers in terms of the passionate versus the steady or consistent. Fathers are great warriors because their fiery hearts scream with love and rage, but this can cause foolishness. So the father is like the stag deer or the rooster, mighty but easily lost in the fray, as the mother is very intentional and sturdy. In comedy, this can be shown as being stubborn or set in her ways, and so unwilling to compromise. But in the home, this often materializes as the mother being the maker and maintainer of her stern laws in her home. Take off your shoes at the door and mind your mother. If you disrespect her, she won't hesitate to dash you a bit with her sandal. Not because she is over-emotional, but because she is clear-minded in her unshakable devotion to her law, to her rules, and the proper way of doing things. This also reflected in the strengths of the hen or the hind deer. Her will is sturdy as stone in the earth itself. No child can bend her wishes, and this is a mighty blessing from the good mother, but also the reason why the selfish stepmother is such a prevalent fairy tale antagonist. Such a strong force is truly bitter when turned against you. But good or bad, she is sturdy and strong, and this is elemental to the essence of the mother. Gentleness and grace only really serve children and newlyweds. Once a couple become householders, they need a fiery father who can stomach politics, and an earthly mother who will hold up all of her children and the animals on her mighty shoulders. She who controls the household money as an allowance that she gives to her husband. So the saying known from Lithuania to Poland, to even as far as Bavaria, can attest. If the husband is the head of the home, then the wife is his neck. She decides where he looks and what he says. A direct refutation to a classic Christian idea, claiming that the wife is headed by the husband and the husband headed by Christ. In summation, in the Anglosphere, it is seen that a delicate little girl becomes a delicate young woman, who then becomes a fair mother who will become a gentle little old lady, while to many Slavs it is that the delicate child will eventually grow up, and when they become householders, the young lady becomes a stern and strong mother, who becomes the stern and watchful grandmother who still even today will sit on front steps and look out windows and sit on balconies, watching all of the town and silently judging. The gaze of the grandmother from the other side of the street feeling like a blessing or curse, depending on how she judges your behavior. Omnipresent but seldom needing to act is like an embodiment of the law of the social order. It is the grandmother who has seen everything under the sun. Not at all that the grandfather is disrespected, but more that he has a specific wisdom, while the grandmother has accumulated an omnibus of all knowledge. Especially it is she who is the keeper of the family history, the knower of all affairs throughout the town, the walking encyclopedia and genealogical record. In many Slavic nations, the ritual nature of the cult of the mother and matriarchal lineage is embodied by the creation of a doll given from the mother to the daughter as a sacred keepsake. This reflected in the tale about the girl with the dead mother mentioned earlier in the video. The most well-known internationally are probably the Ukrainian variants due to their distinctive patterns upon their faces. And while the little girl might own many dolls throughout her childhood, it is specifically this special doll created with special circumstances and techniques, the details varying by the village, that this doll is the protective totem given by the mother that represents the bond between the mother and her child, and the blessing of the mother onto her child. The doll at the same time sort of represents the child and the mother, and the archetypical mother who protects them. The creating powers of the mother are themselves a religious ritual, and the most potent embodiment of what can be called magic. It was incredibly dangerous for women of the past to give birth at all. The most likely way for a woman to die was in the birth of her child, and it is in the little body of water or the bed that the mother gives birth that she is in the arms of her Holy Mother. It is in the sacred bed of life and death that the mother embodies the archetype of the Holy Mother, as if she is a costume wearer on the holidays. In the moment of creation, the mother becomes the sacred mother, thus the undying, paramount respect all the village must owe to the mother in this mighty moment of death and life. We can find the might of the mother within the character I know as Grandmother, the Child Snatcher. You already probably know her common name, but while pop culture might simply call her the witch who eats children, in folklore she is known as a mighty and generous aid to the worthy hero child. Since she's lived for thousands of years, the Grandmother concentrates the two ends of the mother into extremes, eating naughty children or dishing out comedic punishments, while she also spins magic thread and spools, which cast incredible power, and readily blesses the youth who impresses her with dedication and obedience to her household law. Consider young Vasilisa the Brave, who was abused by her wicked stepmother and sent into the forest. But after the girl, with the help of a doll which was blessed by the soul of her dead mother, had met the Grandmother in the forest and passed all of her trials of character, the Grandmother blessed the worthy child with a magical coal within a skull, and when Vasilisa held it up in her home, the fire glow beamed from the eyes onto her stepmother, the stepmother instantly dying quite painfully. And without that foolish stepmother, her father had to return home, and he moved her with him to the city, and together they had a good life. Only the Grandmother, as matriarch over all living women thanks to her great age, would be fit to hand out such punishment to this unfit, unlawful, and unworthy stepmother, abusing her domain. Therefore, as naturally as Perun rips across the skies in his restless fiery passion, so the mother is sturdy, an anchor stone of law which all can depend on, but also unapologetic in her administration of justice against the wicked. On dozens of instances in Poland alone, and likely hundreds across all Slavic nations, she has come to wicked villages or castles where monarchs are sinful, so monstrously that they are beyond divine salvation. So she opens herself up and swallows the castle whole, and across all of Poland are ravines and valleys where, people say, castles used to stand until the earth herself took them away. While she is greatly loving, do not be surprised if circumstances evoke a frightful mother goddess. She is unshakable, her great determination and capacity to punish reflected neatly in her daughters who take after her. All who live upon the motherland also live in a pact with her. They live under the law of her household, and when they violate her law, she is entitled righteously to take it away. There is no white without the black, and this is best seen by the power of the black soil, the source of all life itself, and the color usually attributed to misfortune. This keen understanding of both the endless generosity and limitless wrath of the Earth Mother is unsurprising to find from people who arose along the border of the Great Steppe and the mountains, where can be found the most fertile black soils in the entire world, and mountain landslides and quaking ravines, which surely have swallowed entire villages, hundreds over centuries past. Ziemeia is the soil, and naturally all the bounties of nature. The crops we depend on, the greenery which fills our world, all arise from the mother as blessings to her children. In the folk imagination of Poles, the greens and wilderness are the gowns and dress upon the black earth's body, as the yellow and golden crops which sustain us are the flowing hair off of her head. Often grass is called włosami ziemia, literally the earth's hair, and it is trimmed only on the same holy days when human hair is cut. Her hair is as magical as human hair, so is bound by the same taboos. And, of course, she is black. This is meant literally in terms of the white and black magics. So to say that our wonderful and holy mother who gives birth to all of life is herself endowed and infused with extensive white and black magic. So the white spectrums into the divine colors embroidered upon her gowns, and so her deep flesh also reflects the other extreme of her nature. Perhaps no deity so directly embodies the two nature, the capacity for the divine to both bless and to take blessings away. Thus she, the greatly powerful, is black like the winter demons, but ought not be feared. The blackness is not evil, she simply abounds with mighty fullness in both ends or both extremes of nature. This literal blackness of soil might be the reason that Poles so effortlessly conceptualized the Mother of Christ as black. Most notably, the famous Black Mary was not painted in a dark shade. Rather, the pigments in the paint quickly changed themselves to be a darker hue, and almost all reproductions have respected this, as Poles consider it a sign from Mary that she chose to appear how she wishes to appear. And so, many Poles venerate a literally black Holy Mother of God, and will highlight an important distinction. For centuries, Poles tended to call the dark-skinned peoples by the name Murzyn or Murzynka, derived from the Moorish, the highly regarded Muslims of nations like Algeria or Morocco. In contrast, using the literal words Czarna Madonna was not the way that Poles referred to African peoples for most of their history. She was not ethnically associated with Africans, but was very literally said to be black, as the soil, or the nighttime, or the winter demons and the devil. That she is Czarne specifically, while still being the most holy mortal to ever live, is testament that black magic and white magic, or black and white elements, were not seen in moral binary, but understood to be multifaceted and requiring of the other. It is from the literally black mother and her literally black child that is contained the holy white light of the holy God. This refracts directly from the Earth Mother, comprising the mortal vessels that humanity walks in, as the Holy Father creates the luminous souls within their bodies. So, said simply, these Poles, and also Czechs and others with similar images, likely embraced a dark-skinned mother because she reaffirmed an ancestral image of the Great Mother with black flesh, the black soil as literally as the earth is black. So it also makes sense that the Mother of all good would also appear similarly. Indeed, this resounding importance of the Mother of God shines in Poland and Ukraine, even compared to the other Catholic nations. Similar is true among Orthodox Ukrainians and Belarusians. Within these nations have long persisted the story of Mary's journey through the torments, when the Mother Mary descended into hell to witness the suffering of sinners, and therefore she convinced God to create All Saints and All Souls Days, when sinners in hell might earn redemption and ascend to purgatory, and when those purified by purgatory can ascend to join their Mother in heaven. Mary, the sinless and immaculate, has asserted her place as the centerpiece of a veneration for many Poles. It is obvious that as God's mother she must be the giver of much of his virtue, that her goodness was a blessing unto her son. To close with my favorite example, in the past, snakes walked on legs, but it so happened that the Virgin Mary was walking through the forest, and a snake suddenly peeked out from behind a tree, and she was frightened. "Oh, you hideous reptile!" she cried, alarmed. "How you frightened me! Now you will wriggle along the ground like a thread." And from then on, the reptiles lost their legs and must crawl on their chests. Oh, if you thought God took the snake's legs because of the treachery in Eden, well, no, it was Mary, obviously, of course it was. In Poland, Mary is the Giga Chad, I think the young folk would say. I do not have the time to articulate the vast holiness of the mother to many Slavs, but it testifies a cultural dedication to the holiness of the mother. With all of this context gathered, let's now surmise our reconstructed myth of Mokosh from her own perspective, as the glimpses we've seen of it before in other videos tended to follow perspectives of others. Mokosh was risen from the primordial ocean, and at first was totally black, only soil without growth, until either she united with Perun, and the rains and lightning blessed her, or in one variant of the egg myth it might have been that the sun, impregnated by the moon, came down to earth as a hen or rooster, and laid the egg of life, which hatched and infused Mokosh with the blooming. While it's never stated, I think both myths are probably true, as the sun functions like Earth's bridesmaid, and gives her a gown of greenery, and then she, adorned as the bride, weds and lays with her Perun, and gives birth to the animals and more complicated plants. With all of her body blooming, it was time to give shape to her flesh, to allow herself to be drunken like the milk, and nourish her children, and to this end Perun and the winds and the lesser gods of fire and light conducted a phase of great cultivation, guided from the sky. To help in sculpting, the earth suggested that they create shepherds of her lands, so she and God took heaps of mud and shaped them and baked them in fire. These firstborn children were the great mountain giants. From them came the half-giants or lesser giants, and eventually the humans were created. And after this creating comes the apex of her myth. Back during the initial fight between God and Devil, the young Vovos had created his firstborn child, the Lord of Snakes, who will surely be familiar to returning viewers. He was created to steal soil from the earth and take it to the underworld. So the Lord of Snakes made countless burrows and chambers between the underworld and the living earth, until one day the Lord eventually became too ambitious. Sometime after humanity was birthed, the Lord of Snakes abducted the soul of Mokosh and took her prisoner within the black castle at the threshold at the bottom of the world. At this stage, many Reconstructionist Rudnovri assert that Volwas, perhaps commanding the Snake King or even taking the Snake King's appearance himself, had sought to marry or even lay with the Earth Mother as he held her captive, a sort of a bridal snatching myth. But interestingly, the folklore might indicate this isn't the case, as firstly, other myths survive which recount the time that the devil took a wife, and always she was a human peasant and seems to be an allegory for human death. And secondly, the stories about the Earth's abduction by the Snake Lord, or sometimes a tyrannical dwarf, essentially never state that he seeks to marry her, even though that would be the usual trope in similar stories. But no, in these tales, the Snake Lord simply keeps her captive, as if she's a jewel in his hoard of treasure, which perfectly matches with his initial motivation in the story of his creation. He simply steals chunks of the earth and takes them to the world below. This actually is a worse situation than a wedding, because a wedding would cause some level of power sharing or the merging of domains, while being imprisoned in the underworld would eventually simply cause the death of her body, and so this would kill all of the life and eventually destroy the world. Since folktales follow the perspective of mostly Perun, they don't really preserve what the time of Mokosh's abduction looked like to ordinary people, but we can logically deduce that, since Mokosh was the source of all fertility, that plants were likely withering and people were starving. And since Mokosh arose from the primordial waters, perhaps the waters were encroaching upon the world. Most Slavs have not preserved full retellings of a global flood myth, but some stories like the Slovene tale of Kreznik fighting the snake do mention terrifying flooding of entire river valleys, or plains, as the lightning hero battled the Snake Lord. So we could interpret that Mokosh's abduction once served as a Slavic cognate to the near-global myth of the time of floodings. Alternatively, the loss of fertility and return of water would also cause great coldness, so the time of Mokosh's imprisonment could very well have resembled an endless winter, even a sort of ice age. This myth, indeed, could be an explanation for the initial beginning of the seasons themselves, that for centuries there was a time of endless summer as the giants worked the lands, and then the Snake Lord took Mokosh and brought the first winter with a terrible, long coldness, so Perun descended to the Black Castle and freed Mokosh. Mokosh, and their so-called wedding at the finale is not truly their initial wedding, but instead this is the union which served to begin the cycle of seasons, creating their daughters, brave Zielna to help Perun hold back the snakes, and the Winter Queen Matka to care for her mother and cradle her in blankets, and tend to the landscape while her mother slept, as the fight and abduction with the snake had left Mokosh injured and innately changed, turning her into a being who must sleep, just as her children do. This myth seems most intimately tied to the nature of snakes in folklore. On the one hand, yes, snakes, especially venomous vipers, are of the underworld and magic in the world and waters below. There are also some snakes who are of the atmospheric waters and are therefore more saintly in their characters. But truly, all snakes are themselves under the command of the Earth Mother. She did not birth the snakes, she is not their parent, but the shifting soils of the Earth Mother can crush and kill the snakes all at once. As folklore remembers, the Mary of the Earth is she who took away the legs of snakes. In some myths, the great king of snakes was not killed but was imprisoned at the bottom of the world and was chained by Perun to the soils. It seems perhaps that all snakes serve the Earth Mother out of a sense of penance for the crimes of their father, or that she has adopted them. They are not her direct children, but now they live within her. Along with her bountiful gifts, she has long been trusted with the direct healing of the harmed body. Some sicknesses, but especially burns, are traditionally cured by, at the least, rubbing in layers of mud and clay, or more extremely, by fully submerging the body into soil, only their head exposed so all the body is pressed to earth. Direct damage to the body can be mended by sameness or kindredness with the soil. The flesh of the body is the flesh of the earth. Secrets can also be buried into earth by speaking into a clove and filling it with soil. Also, when people ride off to war or danger, they leave their hair or some necklace or personal item in the soil, as a blessing from the land that they hope to return to. This image of our mother, Earth, is ubiquitous across Polish folklore. Truly, Earth is the mother of mortal mothers, so she commands with might. As Earth holds us in her arms after death, she also frequently intervenes in happenings of the world, with great empathy to young people, maidens, and mothers. In the famous tale of the brother and sister royalty, a beautiful golden-haired princess and a beautiful knightly prince live in their castle tower together. But as they grow older, her brother is taken by a sinful curse of lusting. He comes to desire, then pursue and harass her. He tries to pressure her to lay with him, the most shameful defilement of sacred love. Unable to escape him, her soul crushed by fear and shame, the princess locked herself in the cellar, and far, far from heaven, she instead prayed to the cellar floor she cried on, and the black soils opened beneath her. The earthen mother rose, took her daughter in her arms, and carried her away. Some variants of these tales reveal that the mother empowers young girls to become heroes like she was, just as her husband empowers young men. Such as this variant from central Poland, where after escaping her brother and going to the cavernous world below, the princess wandered through the dungeons and burrows until she made her way to the great black palace, where lived the ancient ghost king who took a young girl prisoner, kidnapped from her mother, a queen from some far-off land. And the guard of the castle of the ghost king was a mighty she-ram with 12 heads, which had 12 throats which blew 12 winds. When the wandering princess arrived, the captive of the ghost king warned her of the impending danger of him and his guardian. So to avoid a murderous death and to allow them to work together, the captive girl talked our princess into letting her transform her by magic into the form of a tiny needle. So when the ram and the ghost sensed an intruder was in their palace, all they could find was a needle which they couldn't break. Our princess persuaded the captive girl that they should run away, so as it was sleeping they sealed the ram's throat with wool and chaff, and taking an enchanted brush and handkerchief they escaped the palace. But as soon as they were gone, the ram broke free. One by one each had cleared its throat, and they sent the 12 winds after the fleeing girls. And as they fled through the forests of the underworld, waving the magical brush caused the trees to pass out of their way, and then reseal behind them to trap the beast. But the sealing of the trees was not definitive, and it continued to pursue them, so they took off to the waters around the kingdom. And flipping the handkerchief, the sea parted for the girls and allowed them through. And plunging into the waters, the 12-headed ram sank, Its fangs bit the water, but it was unable to escape. It was drowned, and it was imprisoned in the waters, and the girls ran free. Earth's so-called mother was water, so Earth was the first concrete thing, the first composition of solid matter, arisen by combining elements. This makes Earth the first matriarch of the physical line of mothers, who give rise to life from Earth-like wombs. All mothers like her are makers of physical matter. The creating powers of the mother are themselves a religious ritual, and the most potent embodiment of what can be called magic. As the mother of mothers, Earth deserves a respect akin to all the mother ancestors compounded. She takes respect seriously, a tale of northern Poland recounts. Once a woman named Belinda was blessed with an unprecedented gift. She could bring forth great numbers of children with indescribable ease. It was so easy for her to birth that she didn't only make children from her womb, but she made children off of her hands, her feet, her head, and all of her. They came off of her like buds. Her pride in her fertility made the earth angry, as the earth is the most fertile of all mothers. So one day, as Belinda was crossing a meadow which happened to be quite marshy, her feet were ensnared by the black soil. Earth gripped her feet so tightly that she couldn't move from the spot, and in time she was transformed into the willow tree. This is why Polish common folk view the willow as a sacred tree, and the willow, along with its products, possess and endow great powers upon fertility and abundance. Around either Corpus Christi or Pentecost, some Poles make processions for the Holy Mary, parading her through the countryside on a path decorated with, or in some cases constructed out of, holy flowers, arranged to form the familiar holy and fertile symbols which might be recognized from Easter eggs. These holidays generally celebrate the Mary, the Mother of Flowers, who herself is a little vaguely defined, but while we're here, I will say that I do find it strange how much resistance to the concept of the sacred and holy shapes people online have given. Familiar symmetrical flowers, or the spinning wheels, which represent cycles, the diamond, which represents the earth and the earthen element, are really very clearly established in folk culture motif. For me to say that this diamond pattern often represents the earth or earthen is about the least controversial thing I can say in this entire video. I think people become confused because they associate these patterns more like specific religious symbols of power in Western esoterica, like the seals which summon demons. So I'll stress that the familiar holy symbols in Slavic culture are much less like those, and more familiar to, obviously, the cross, but also think about the familiar ways that the Western cultures represent the sun, or clouds, or rain. The culture has decided to draw a fish, then decided that one particular fish happens to represent Jesus. It's not that the earth diamond is some potent witch's sigil for demonology. It's simply that, over centuries, folk art needed a way to represent certain ideas, such as the earth, and it happened to repeatedly fall on this sort of pattern. Just the same way that you probably draw a heart like this, even though it looks nothing like an anatomical heart. Likewise, you're calling this shape a diamond isn't part of some magic ritual. You just learned through your upbringing that you call this a diamond, and no, it doesn't look like the actual diamonds from the ground, but still you call it a diamond because that is the cultural abstraction which you are familiar with. It's quite simple, that's really all there is to it. In the creation of Wisła, the Vistula River, whose basin roughly marks the heartland of Poland, the river began as two sisters, White Wisła and Black Wisła, who naturally are the springs which become the river. They lived atop the mountains in those first centuries of the world, along with their father, King Biskid, and their mother, Queen Borana, the giants who made and literally inhabited the mountains of Baranya Góra. One day the sisters decided to leave the safety of the mountains and explore the lowlands. The place they left became the sources of the streams. So hand in hand the sisters traveled, leaving a trail of water in their wake to find their way home. But when they passed the peak of Chantoria, the knightly spirit Chantor, who dwelled within it, tried to stop the sisters and send them back home. But he was too forceful, and in defense of the sisters, the earth rose and spoke to her grandson, son, commanding him to step aside and allow the sisters to pass, since it was what they wanted for themselves, and he relented. The Earth Mother's interest in the girl's fate is unsurprising, not only because she serves as symbolic mother to everything, but because, of course, she directly made the spirits of the mountains together with God, back in the oldest days, so these sisters and many rivers are literally her grandchildren. Similarly, tales such as the following abound across Poland. In almost every region they tell of young women who went out into the fields in autumn, only to vanish without a trace. But in the spring, people working the fields in another village far away witness as the young woman is released from the soil, which opens like a door, releasing her unharmed. Folklore suggests this happened apparently fairly often as Italians reported sightings of Christ. And most tellings don't explain the life these women had lived back in their home villages, or the lives they built in their new homes, but their mother must have had good reason to hide and relocate them. Mother Mary is principally important to the Poles, and the most important Marian holiday is likely the day of Matka Zielna, the Day of Mary of Herbs, which to other Catholics is called the Feast of the Holy Mother's Assumption. The Catholics often believe that Mary was deathless, meaning that when her time came, instead of dying in her body, she was taken by God directly to heaven, leaving behind no body. So early medieval Christians maintained a story that Mary was laid down to die, but when people returned to fetch her body, it had vanished and been replaced with the bouquets of extravagant flowers. And while this flower story was not made accepted Roman Catholic doctrine, it still became principally important to the Poles, who anchored it and drastically expanded its connection into their pre-existing folk cosmology. Every mid-August, the Poles craft extravagant bouquets for the Mother of Herbs. This is the first phase of harvest's end, and gifting these flowers and herbs to Mary will see her bless the end of harvest with bountiful wheat and produce. As the Mary of Herbs is the crop giver, she herself is also made out of herbs as icons, reflecting that vegetation is made from her hair, or is allowed to grow only by her blessing. So Mary is responsible for all the growing things which are harvested, and her holy crown is often also made of vegetation. Along with these Marian icons paraded by holy men or community leaders through town, respected mothers of the community also bake a holy bread. This single largest loaf of holy bread is an offering to the mother, made in gratitude of her gracious gifts. Of course, when it is presented to the Father for blessing with holy water, it is customary for the holy men and town leaders to kiss the bread as they kiss the mother or the springtime soil. Little breads are also made by community mothers to pass out to young folk in wide varieties of blessings and protection customs. Once again, the Poles love their sacred mother. A few weeks after the harvests are concluded, the people celebrate with the greatest of all feasts of the year, reveling in all of the baked goods which have just been harvested and preparing to stow what remains to endure the winter. During these weeks of festivities and celebration, often a particular woman of the community, usually a mother or likely soon mother-to-be, is elected the sort of queen of the harvest season. As an inverse to the king and queen of springtime who brought youthful fertility, this queen of harvests embodies all the bounties of the maturated year. This Queen of Harvests is made a massive wreath of grains, which she wears around as she is paraded, lifted up on the shoulders of young men or on carts and taken through the fields, blessing the now harvested grounds as they prepare to enter the winter. Some of these feasts can stretch into mid-October, but seldom further than that. This proximity is enough for many reconstructionist rodnovery to sort of combine these harvest holidays into the date of Halloween on October 31st, to turn the holiday of the 31st into their holiday for Mokosh. And this is rather a modern decision. Historically, these harvests were just done in this rough time frame whenever the local crops were done and ready. But again, there is nothing particularly wrong with celebrating a harvest day for Mokosh on a particular date, such as October 31st. Òprzepôłonica's feast day on October 16th likewise is sometimes used as an anchor point for the celebration of days of Mokosh, and it is a bit compelling since several villages especially venerate Mary on this day, even though she doesn't really have much to do with the saint's story. But again, this seems like more of a thin connection where the timing just happens to work out. Then come and go All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, Day, which are important days for Mary since the folk consciousness credits her with their existence to begin with, but these are primarily days for the ancestors themselves. So finally we come to the end of November with the main holidays of St. Andrew, and these are the holidays which begin to get quite interesting, beginning a short chain of divination-based holidays which continue through to the end of December. As nights get longer and Earth loses her green gown, she falls asleep, and her daughter covers her with blankets of snow. Let loose from the world below, demons of winter rampage and parade all over the world as she slumbers. But even though she sleeps, a small part of the mother remains aware in the mortal world, among with white characters of Old Man Star, who preserves the weakened Perun, and the little lady Saint Lucy of Fire, who blossoms into the fiery Mary of the Thunder Candle in February, preserving the Daughter Zielna. Also, there comes the character of God's Bride. The naming does get complicated. Technically, the bride, or the child, are names both interchanged between a wife of God versus a daughterly figure. Likewise, a veil-like head covering is often applied to the daughter, or the Saint Lucy, with mysterious connotations of modesty rather than marriage. Perhaps an unusual Christianization of the maiden. But in handfuls of villages across Greater Poland and Silesia, in the southwestern edges of Lesser Poland, and prevalent across most of Czechia, and especially among the Sorbs, the endangered and tiny Slavic minority of eastern Germany, these places maintain the most distinct image of God's bride, as wholly distinct from the fiery daughter. Interestingly, the bride has a cognate among Hungarians as Saint Lucy, but we'll shortly discuss the saint, and this bride is not the same character, especially not in Czechia or Sorbia. The bride's veil is profoundly intricate, hauntingly beautiful. It is strictly taboo for the bride to show her face until she is finished inhabiting the spirit for the holiday. Taking on costumes of the white spirits is solemn, even sacred, as if the wearer becomes the spirit for a day. She is usually portrayed by teenagers, contrasting the more comedic bridal characters played in other parades by full adults. In Czechia, she is also named Saint Barbara, but unsurprisingly bears almost no resemblance to her Christian namesake, a plainly evident instance of name-swapping. The brides go around the village visiting the children. Among many winter gift-givers, they bless children with sacred sticks and gifts of earth, keeping earthen power alive in the form of ferns and shrubs which survive and grow deep into the winter. Unlike the fiery girl, this bride of God typically travels without a male counterpart, instead escorted by an entourage of female spirits. Her companions are bird-faced spirits named after Saint Lucy, or Saints Lucies, as they always exist as many, never one, an entire type of white spirit in extreme contrast to the standard Christian tradition of Saint Lucy, and contrast to the Hungarian and Polish traditions, apart from those Czech villages which actually also name her Lucy. This kind of inconsistency and complete disunity from the Christian explanation is the hottest smoking gun for tracing pre-Christian traditions which Christianized several times independently. Another example, some Czech villages had extensive German immigration, which helped encourage Czechs to replace this figure in some places with the character of Perukta, or Perkta. Yes, the literal Germanic goddess Perkta, brought to the Czechs from cultural exchange with Bavarian Germans. As a Germanic goddess, she rode across the sky in the Wild Hunt, bringing the snow and wrangling her demonic children. But over the centuries, the Czech version sadly lost most of her mythology and became one of the more interchangeable demons of winter. Back to our focus, since the Bride of God maintains her personality far more strongly than Perkta, we ought to take note. We can understand her explicitly bridal nature with little interpretation. She is the bride of God. She cannot find her husband, since it is winter and he is returning to the world above to regain his strength. And since most of her is sleeping, only this small, fragile aspect of the Supreme Mother remains, appearing reduced as an uncertain young bride, but still holy, just a fraction of her previous mighty power, at least until she can fully awaken again. Indeed, when the folkloric memory of Perun comes to rest rescue his Mokosh, he is rejuvenated to the form of a youthful man, and she is rejuvenated to a young princess bride. It is with their reunion that the two rediscover their might and return to their maturation. Refocusing on her bird ladies, the Lucies are embodied by teenagers as they go around reading fortunes and dispersing divinations, and partaking in thread work like sewing, suggesting on their own that they might connect to the celestial fate sisters, such as Georgia, or directly to Mokosh. Whichever specific route brought them to this form is complicated, but their striking appearance can be better understood with the examinations of other bird-faced and bird-aligned woman spirits. Known to most Slavic countries is the little household demoness who is often named some variant of Kikimora, but modern pop culture has severely distorted her traditional variants, so let's deconstruct and carefully work our way back. Her most popular form in today's pop culture has this chicken ibis or chicken bison demoness with a long beak and a beast's horns, or with a face looking like the skull of a bison or ibis, is fundamentally mostly fan art derived from a single rendition of the spirit which became quite popular and then inspired many further artists. A bit like how Frankenstein's monster doesn't look that way in the book, but most pop culture takes inspiration instead from early American film adaptations. Indeed, folklore often takes a winding and convoluted path to the present, and every step of the way can't necessarily be trusted at face value. Folkloric canon needs to be compared to itself, and relying too heavily on narrow threads of it can be misleading. Another example of this phenomena arises from a 1909 issue of the Russian children's Christianity magazine Òprzepôłnica. Indeed, it takes the great mighty cat who guards the pole or gate to the afterlife and just reduces him to an ordinary-looking cat. And along with this, it takes the blackness of the demoness from a spiritual association into something more similar to an African girl. Don't take this kind of demystification too literally. It's similar to the process of cryptozoologists reducing legendary mythological figures like the Yeti into apparently more realistic, organic animals instead of legendary creatures. Stripping away centuries of surprisingly severe reinterpretations, the core of Kikimora sees her as the grandmother of the swamp or forest, who looks rather human except for a couple of strange features. Most often, she has a giant nose, a stereotype common of ancient spirits since the noses of people do get bigger as they age, so naturally a very ancient being would have a very large nose. Also, Kikimora will often be moss green or soil black, with the legs or paws of some type of animal, most often a chicken, but also cats or cows or all manners of creatures. Her mostly human but disheveled appearance as a forest witch was somewhat comedically reflected in the current war, where soldiers wearing camouflage suits referred to them as Kikimora costumes, as they were looking like the little demoness as they hobbled and crawled their way through the swamps and tall grasses at night. She, as a supernatural grandmother, usually becomes attracted to a home with the birth of a child, and she will skulk around the property and sneak inside the bedrooms at night. Often, also, she'll take up residence inside the sewing wheel, where she busies herself sewing and knitting and embroidering. But as she watches the happenings of the home, she will treat residents accordingly to their behavior. Improper mothers who fail to keep a good home will see the demoness tangle up their spinning wheel, dirtying her grain, and perhaps even destroying the kitchen and house over the night so it will never be tidy again. If the mother is good, and especially if she leaves the demoness offerings, she'll take care of sewing for the mother and will protect and tend to the chickens, thus her occasional depiction with the feet of her favored flock. If suddenly wronged, householders might expect their chickens to have stopped laying eggs, or perhaps their chicken die, or their cows stop giving milk. Naughty children might expect her lurking at night over the foot of the bed, harassing them and ensuring that they cry through the night, or crawl onto their chests during sleep to torment and enthrall the child with horrifying dreams, though she is not the same as the primary dream-bringing spirits, like the similarly named but distinct Mora. Indeed, she is a grandmother, and the threads she weaves inside the home literally can control fates or fortunes of people in her home. This is the symbolism of the spinning wheel, as the mother determines much of her family's success by how well she makes their clothing. So the demonic grandmother amplifies this naturally. All the children she sneaks into the bedrooms of. She twists or straightens hair. She sits at the wheel and spins perfect threads or nasty knotted garments. The fate of the home is within the grandmother's hands, and she acts in response to the competency of the mother. The symbolism couldn't be more direct. This Kikimora is likely identical to and possibly the origin of the archetypical grandmother of fate, a fleeting but common stereotype in folk symbolism, that a little old lady sits spinning at all times of the day. She spins the fortunes of her children and grandchildren. Much like the Western knight in shining armor or damsel in distress, this character just sort of exists in myriads of forms, with no particular distinct origin. This makes it unsurprising that, in regions of Central Eastern Russia, folklorists recorded villages who refer to their variants of Kikimora by the name of Mokosh. To them, the little grandmother of fate must be appeased and respected in a familial dynamic, especially similar to most Slavs caring for their household domovoi, or their regional equivalent, the spirit who personifies the house or forefathers and lives inside the oven. So it is that many say Mokosh lives beneath the oven and scuttles out from it at night. All of this said, it seems likely that the Lucies became bird-like through a now-forgotten web of folkloric associations between many demonic women who relate to both fate and to householding, which often includes caring for the chickens, who were often kept in a coop right next to the house, or were allowed inside the house. The Lucies, Kikimora, and many others carry a legacy of the stereotypical grandmother of fate spinning. Many South Slavs know different women who emerge from the forest to deliver gifts or punishments to the families who venerate her. Swavians are familiar with a scarecrow called Matoha or Matocha. Her name denotes the Great Mother or the Old Mother. That is all I know of that. Likely these mothers are cognates to the night women in Polish forests, spirits dressed like mothers who sit at night in bodies of water, simply cleaning their laundry while the rivers are empty. But if they are interrupted, they will chase and beat the trespasser. Mainly the night women leave the waters if mothers leave laundry outside unattended overnight, so they steal the laundry and sneak into the home to sabotage the spinning wheel or tie up the mother's threads. Similar spirits are known to many Slavs, in contrast to the more famous youthful water spirits who prefer to seduce and drown their targets. Another spirit who might derive from the mother has become more difficult to identify, as she mainly embodies traits also shared by daughters of Mokosh, both her ferocious guardian and the caretaker of her sleep-death. Especially important is a major spirit of the Kashubi of northern Poland, the opposite of the spirit who kills workers in the fields, which we might identify with Zielna. In contrast, this lady, Òprzepôłnica, emerges from the bright noonlight, shimmering in the wheat, to visit the farmers and bless them with great fertility and fortune. Her holy day is Friday, so the Kashubi wouldn't begin the harvest until after Friday had passed, since working the fields on her day would be offensive. And before entering the fields in hopes of meeting the wheat giver, Kashubi, like many Poles, would make a cross of flowers or herbs and toss it into the tall wheat, in offering to the kindred Zielna Baba, or Zielona Babcia, the wild grandmother of crops and grasses who ensures farmers respect the fields, and who might tangle up disrespecters or cause them to get lost in the grasses or be beaten by the grass they disrespect. And she is sometimes named Złota Babcia, the golden grandmother. This name is peculiar for appearing all across northern Eurasia and causing Christians of the 1500s to either speculate or outright claim that pagans were still worshipping some golden mother in secret. The golden grandmother has been disproven as a single goddess, given just how far apart her worshippers supposedly were. But much like other characters in this video, it's very likely that several individuals saw several traditions of festivals in honor to grandmothers of harvests and fields, and then just asserted them to be a unified deity, because it's easier to blame one single Christian demon than to understand the excessively complicated nature of folk traditions that cause these characters to arise. Also, in this similar area area of the north and east along the borderland where East Slavs and Karelians and their Siberian cousins all live together, both Karelian and Slav have greatly elevated the saint, Paraskiewa Piatnica, as she, the holy embodiment of the day of Friday, with some command over Wednesday, and the arts of sewing and finance and wealth and cooking and all womanly skills and all matriarchal power. So it is that further from her center of worship, the Holy Lady and the demonesses like Kikimora were frequently interchanged as their domains blatantly overlapped. To a degree she is known to almost all Slavs and even non-Slavs in a more vague form, but especially in the northeast as a center of her veneration, idols of the magical lady have long been decorated and celebrated. Interestingly, most of her depictions grant her very dark skin, despite the usual northernly complexions of her Slavic and Karelian venerators. This is open to interpretation, so what follows is my subjective opinion. But in seeing her visage, I can't help but be reminded of the locals and neighbors like the Manzi, or the Kanti. The cultures here often have a rich tan complexion, and several of their traditions do know a supreme Earth Mother who is wife of the Sky Father. Though in several of their traditions, it is in fact the Earth Mother and the radiant celestial deer who are one and the same, who we would consider Mother Mokosh and Dantor. Many of these people might simply combine. So I can't help but wonder if their Holy Mother, the creator of humans who shapes their fate, also happening to be the same as the mighty hunting goddess, might have in one or several ways rubbed off on the neighboring cultures. Though really this is just an excuse to mention a deity I find fascinating. This really could be anything. Regardless, it wouldn't be fair to say that this Saint Friday is identical to Mokosh, but her cult seemed to thrive and take on its own peculiarities because the local Slavs and Karelians refused to abandon ancient Earth Mother customs. Instead, they simply transformed the holidays and superstitions which they had always practiced to fit into Christian worldview. Glistening with silver like fish scales at the bottom of a well are the various works of women's art, donated or thrown directly into the well, often with a loud statement about the direct purpose of the donation. Also sewn clothes in the form of shirts, towels for decorating a wreath and face, combed linen hemp or straightforward ready-made threads, as well as wool. For the saint, stockings, for the Mother of Friday, an apron, women shout in such cases. I might as well also comment on another classic Wikipedia moment. Mokosh's Wikipedia article claims that the identification of Saint Friday to Mokosh has been criticized because Saint Friday's associations with spinning, water, and Friday have Christian rather than pagan roots, but no citation is given and it doesn't expand on this. But then if you go to the Wikipedia page about Saint Friday, it legitimately just doesn't explain what her Christian story is, so I don't know how on earth anybody is supposed to learn about this or figure this out. So, for context, Saint Friday supposedly lived in the Roman Empire in the area that is roughly now Serbia. Their non-doctrinal Christian folklore states that she had been arrested and persecuted for preaching Christianity in the 2nd century, but even after being extensively tortured, she refused to stop preaching, and after she was made unable to talk, she still went around holding a scroll dedicating that she believed in God, her Father Almighty. On an occasion, she destroyed Roman idols, so the emperor came for her and punished her by burning her with candles. And still she did not relent, so she was taken away and finally beheaded. So the folklore goes. And because of her life story as being a martyr, she is incredibly important in Serbia and to a lesser extent throughout Balkan Christianity. The stock video you see of all of the prayers at the supposed body of Saint Friday that I use is at her supposed resting place in Romania. However, nobody has presented a strong historical causal link between the Saint Friday who supposedly lived out this life in Serbia all the way up to the Eastern Saint Friday. Indeed, often a Romanian or Serbian will say that she was a real human woman who happened to be named Friday and is venerated for dying because of her faith, where in the Eastern tradition she is literally symbolically representative of the day of Friday, without her mythological origin story. But even saying that the story in the Balkans of the supposed real woman doesn't connect her to spinning or or fate or water or any of those associations. They're simply just not part of the Christian story. So to connect them firmly to a Christian origin requires extrapolating 2 or 3 steps removed from the saint to other Christian iconography, arguing that since holy water exists in Christianity, therefore this is like that and not pagan. The arguments about it are incredibly speculative, so I don't consider it fair to present it in such concrete terms as this Wikipedia article does. People in general just don't like to abandon traditions which they've always practiced. So rather than abandoning, they will more likely repurpose. This same exact process is responsible for bringing the Slavic goddess Mokosh to the voodoo religion. During the times of Napoleon, as long-term allies of the Polish, the French gathered many Polish soldiers to volunteer to help the French keep peace on their colony. But when the Poles arrived on Haiti and observed the brutal crushing of Haitian spirit, many of these Polish partisans saw their own suffering under partition reflected within the Haitians, and many Poles rebelled against the French and joined the Haitians in their fight for freedom. And many of these Poles carried the icon of their Black Madonna, and after the war, once the Haitians had slaughtered all of the French, these Poles were invited to remain and become citizens, and a portion of the Haitian nation still today descends from these Poles, and the Haitians began making icons of their voodoo goddess, Ezili Dantor, apologies for that pronunciation, using the Black Madonna as reference, thus syncretizing particularly the Polish Mokosh Mary with their own goddess and creating a wholly unique tradition. Haitians say their goddess inspired the revolution, stoked their hearts to seize control of their nation, just as the Poles believe that Mary was the Queen of Poland, and had stirred the Poles to rise up and endure the long partition and occupation to finally bring back their nation. So their shared sufferings had brought these two peoples to combine their deities, and still today many Haitians represent their goddess in the image taught by Poles. Mighty mother of 3 different nations, the national goddess of 2 different nations, brought into harmony by the unbreakable human will and our sheer stubborn refusal to let our respective ancient customs die. All of this to say that there have been scholars skeptical of acknowledging the folkloric characters of Saint Friday or Black Mary because their names are Christian, therefore they assume they must 100% be Christian. But to be blunt, I find a certain share of scholars to be naive and wholly unaware of the whole extent of tradition mixing which has rampaged throughout all of human history. These processes literally happen and can be observed all of the time. While this is much too complicated to fully explore here, the well-explained creation stories of God and Devil lifting the earth and the story of the cosmic egg hatching to bring life are accompanied, mostly among some East Slavs, by a mysterious third type of creation story, in which God is a being with a great body, who tears his own body apart and reforms each body part into various aspects of creation, making all of creation a part of God's great body. This rarest story type is similar to creation stories among Hindus. I mention this today since, within the Narvi basin of eastern Poland, an ancient folk song preserves an outlier among outliers, a form of creation story sung on midsummer in which the goddess, not the god, has her life symbolically end in her transformation into parts of the cosmos.
Drzewo na tym drzewie, kolebeczka w tej kolebce, panna kołychali, 2 braciszki kołychali, rozbombali, wyrzucili hasła panna, licem w ziemię, sercem grzemie i zapyta się braciszek, czy nie zdrowiej, czy nie lepiej, ona mówi, mój braciszku, główka boli, sercem leje, a ja umrę, moi bracia, pochowajcie w ogródeczku i nasiejcie 3 ziółeczek, a jak się zjadą panowie,
This stanza, in which the sister is buried in a garden where not only herbs are planted, but the earth is repeatedly broken for ongoing agriculture, simply flashes bright neon signs that this is a mythical metaphor. The Poles never did agriculture exactly in the same plot of land as a burial plot. No, this breaking of the earth is powerfully literal. There was the god and the devil, and between them was Wateri Hanna, and the conflict between god and devil thrust Wateri Hanna out of her place in the cosmos and struck her against the hard earth, as if their conflict, say, created the earth right in the middle of her chest like a great dagger which the brothers then dove into during their fight. So the thrusting of the earth into the water caused great harm. This was the first time in creation that anything similar to death or injury had happened, so little devil doesn't understand. But the making of earth greatly depowered the waters, as now the young earth has separated all life on her surface from the watery origin. So the waters flow up through earth, but in a residual sense. They become the earth's waters, passed on to the child, and the watery mother is buried, quite literally buried, beneath the earth. But in the spring, when the soil is broken for agriculture, when wells are dug, the waters of the deeper world trickle up, which remind us of the watery mother now buried beneath the earth. So as the soil is broken, they can say, "Here lies Miss Hanna." It also seems it could be that the 3 herbs planted are cognate to the 3 layers of the cosmic tree, that the symbolic death and literal burial of the water mother allowed the 3 distinct layers of creation to flower, as once everything was unified or dominated by the infinite sea, but with the establishment of earth over sea came the blooming of all 3. This brings to my mind a cosmology held by many Reconstructionist Greenery, in which the older mother of the universe is a predecessor to the goddess Mokosh. But again, leaning more on Polish folklore for guidance, we might draw the line between goddesses much earlier. The earth herself is a goddess who gives us life, but she herself had a mother who is now very literally obscured by her child. You could even take this metaphor further, understanding Hanna as essentially dying in childbirth, and within her daughter she symbolically reincarnates, enduring through the watery aspects of the earth. This in and of itself a manifestation of the line of Matriarch. The enduring souls of the mothers before the mother, the soul of the mother within her child's doll. And to die in childbirth itself was a sacred tragedy, a divine honor, befalling the greatest women of Polish history. So as a man might honor himself by dying upon his horse, so the mother greatly honors herself and her lineage by dying within the act of divine creation. This continuing to Mokosh's symbolic death and rebirth within her slumber and awakening throughout every year. Interestingly, it is within the winter when Mokosh slumbers that her body is totally covered by the watery makings of her own daughter Marzanna, coming to cover the mother with water. And it is through this understanding of the waters of the winter being mirrored by the waters between life and afterlife and the great rivers that carry dead souls to the world below, that you can either literally understand the Mokosh's soul as having once been taken to the Black Castle of the Snake Lord, or perhaps, metaphorically, it is taken every single year during the winter. While I lean towards the first interpretation and explaining why it would probably take an entire exploration of the folk stories again on their own, this is to say that understanding the imprisonment and freeing of Mokosh as a telling of the yearly cycle is fairly valid and logical. You can make an argument for it. This understandably might feel complicated, but further attestation of the watery mother who predated the earthen mother can be found at the threshold of the Balkans and the Alps. In the river valley of Socha, in far western Slovenia, a handful of villages preserved the folklore about a watery mother, who they call in Slavic Wielka Baba, and this name is similar to grandmothers known by other Slovenes and Croats, as the name of a goddess simply embodying the motherland. But in this valley of Socha, this lady is different, and is also named Nikrmana. This name Nikrmana doesn't seem to originate from a strictly Slavic etymology, and so Slovene scholars have traced it to even a pre-Slavic faith. Thus, the scholars believe that this goddess, within the folklore, might be a unique syncretism, where the importance of a water goddess from some religion before the Slavs, perhaps some Illyrian tribe, had allowed this tribe of Slavs to retain the goddess's position within the Slavic faith, elevating the water mother in an opposite phenomena to most other Slavs who gradually elevated the lightning maker. Parallels can also be drawn to the cosmology of Pomeranians, who believe life was brought to Earth when the sun and moon brought all of their children, the animals, to the barren soils and encouraged life on Earth with a great blooming. They say, sometime in the timeless time lived Nikrmana in the non-world, where had shined many stars, moons, and suns. The life was there, rich and diverse, but because there was not enough room, Nikrmana planned to move part of that to somewhere else. She recalled that there was the Earth, a place where darkness dominated, and she sent there a few stars, and to know the effect of the stars, she sent a golden eagle, and upon their return the eagle reported that part of Earth is still too dark, so Nikrmana sent there the moon, and after their next visit the golden eagle reported the moon was unsure. They only shined sometimes, and only sometimes half of it, the next time the whole, and the third time the moon was not there because it throws light to the other side of Earth. So to solve the lighting, Nikrmana sent the sun. So during the next days, Nikrmana sent big heavy clouds full of water. They circulated for weeks above parts of the earth and wetted it, so that there appeared in Slovenia the river Socha, Idria, Batsa, and all the other ones, as well as the many brooks and springs. Then the thunderbolts brought the fire. When there was enough water, Nikrmana sent down many white clouds full of seeds and diverse plants and trees. And in order for the sowing of vegetation to succeed, she also sent Vetrindo, the wind god, and soon the earth became green and overgrown. It was the time for migration of all the animals from the non-world. There were formed tens of rainbows of all sizes, which helped the animals to drop from the non-world onto the meadows, forests, brooks, and rivers. At last they were lacking only people. Therefore Nikrmana sent 2 pairs of people on a big red cloud which slowly let off to the earth. This story is immeasurably valuable to the Slavic polytheists of Western Slovenia, who hold this mother water in an equally mighty regard as many Rudnovery in Poland might hold Svarog or Perun, or as many Rudnovery in Ukraine or Belarus hold their Rud Absolute. She arises from quite similar cosmology, only the perspectives on the importance of deities truly varies. The earth belongs to people, animals, and plants, and the spirits are overflying it all. There is the first overspirit as the wind spirit, and he moves from earth to the clouds. Above him is the water spirit, and from time to time descends all the way down to earth. Just beneath the invisible sky ceiling expands the vastness of thunder and lightning. Above this ceiling is the third world, the home of the moon, the sun, and the stars. Only after that comes the overworld, where Nikrmana rules, that governs everything below and above the earth, all the way to the overworld. Further on, even from the overworld, is an unknown non-world that is and will always remain an eternal secret to man. Essentially, these villages agree with poles about the earth, the border region of the water and the sky, and about the mighty island or mountain where celestial bodies live. The difference comes with the primordial waters, which to the Slovenes rise from the bottom to form an entire world below and above, ruled by a goddess of all material, or in modern terminology, a goddess of the universe and all material existence. Then above even this water goddess is something else which just isn't for humans to know. Many Eastern Rudnovery would limit the waters to just underlie the below, and they would identify the resident of that reverse side as Perun or Rud, and they would claim that the forces in the distant place are just extensions of the limitless Rud Absolute, who is sometimes imagined much more abstractly in Polish folklore as the Bóg Absolute, who is presumably the primordial fire force. This disagreement on the highest levels of cosmology doesn't disrupt the agreement over all of the rest. They're highly familiar to the disagreements between son versus father, which were explored in past videos. Now just introducing the motherly side of the question, switching between the mother and father instead of just the generations of mother and daughter, father and son. So this type of variation is perhaps the least surprising thing to find. Finally, I ought to conclude this discussion by recognizing one of the most prevalent existences of the Earth Mother within the modern culture. While there may be hundreds of thousands of Slavic polytheists, whether or not they openly identify as such, the polytheists are admittedly dwarfed by a few million Wicca, or New Age adherents. Now, the history of the international Wicca community is incredibly complicated since it actually does stem from a fairly organized societal structure with strict adherence to particular formal doctrine. But with the New Age movement of the 80s and 90s, the influence of Wicca exploded and far outpaced the originating societies. And so, today in nations like Poland, there might be a few thousand official adherents of these Wicca churches as they originally were known, but the overwhelmingly prevalent Wicca communities of the modern nations are essentially just a vague New Age movement that worships the Earth Mother, but also cognizant of its own history and with its own twists. I don't think I can call it Slavic polytheism, since they very specifically only really worship one goddess and nobody else, but many of these people take effort to reincorporate and rediscover folk motif or folk song melody and create new art within the patterns of the traditional, since many of them also believe that they are simply upholding the traditional religion, and it's simply that some of these people have been slightly influenced by other New Age movements, so they've taken a slightly different perspective. Functionally, looking at the worship practices and customs of the Earth Mother worshipping New Agers, as long as they aren't bringing in the more exotic elements that Wicca sometimes holds, I don't think there's that much that separates a traditionally minded New Ager in what they do and how they worship when contrasted against any other Reconstructionist. It's really just another flavor of Reconstruction. The immensity and totality of the Earth Mother's importance is so vast that it feels difficult to surmise. It feels like I'm trying to explain why the Egyptians valued the Nile River and its flooding so highly. To anywhere in the world, the Earth is important, and especially in the fertile black fields of Eastern Europe, the importance of the Earth Mother is paramount. I'm tempted to display some of her kitchen magic over cooking, to display some of her nature magic within the herbs, to explain the sacred springs of life water, to recount a dozen tales to give her personality a complete picture. It is not necessarily that her domain is the most broad or the most complicated, but simply that it is so important that it's difficult to explain, as it's difficult to explain that we need to breathe air and drink water. So I think the simplest way to summarize Matka Ziemia, the Mother Mokosh, is simply by saying that she is the motherland, that she is the Earthen Queen, the mother of mothers, and the literal soil which life grows from, the literal planet that we live on. She is the goddess who you can go outside right now and touch the flesh of, and so you must treat her with the respect that this obliges. The motherland is simply motherland. In a future video, we'll take a look at the archaeological legacy of the ancient Earth Mothers which have led to the worship of Mokosh, along with what we know and speculate or reconstruct about her worship in the days of polytheism. So, as it is, we'll conclude this discussion here. As always, I give a generous and compassionate thanks to all of our patrons who support this endeavor and allow it to continue. I thank everyone greatly for their patience. The previous deity video was just a simple, shorter one, so the last time we actually went this in-depth on a deity was almost a year ago. I spent a lot of time painting over the script since it was quite important to me to get the wording as correctly as I could. The next longer deity video will not be so far away as this one was from the last one. With the start of this year, I felt a reaffirmment and reassurance in my more documentary approach, which I want to elaborate on further in the coming year. So we will also be trying out some new video formats with things like showcases of particular holy sites. But in the nearish future, there will be one more Q&A video for the time, so if you have any questions you would like to be answered in video format, perhaps more in-depth questions or ones requiring more complicated or lengthy explanations, then please do leave those questions in the comments of this video or on the community post. As always, we also have the Discord server that you are free to join if you would like to ask questions there. As it is April. Thank you for watching, and I hope everyone is having a good year.